Hello, coaches, and welcome to the Coaching Youth Hoops podcast. I am your host today, Coach Bill Flitter with basketballpracticeplans.com. And if you're struggling putting a practice plan together, head on over to basketballpracticeplans.com. We got practice plans for K through 8. And speaking of that, we have a guest that I actually met through basketball practice plans. Coach David, he coaches 5th grade girls. We struck up a conversation actually over our customer service chat bot. And turns out David has a long history in emotional intelligence, sports psychology. We call you Dr. Dave. Is that what you go?
No, it was cool the first week after I got my PhD, but I haven't used the doctor since.
You haven't used it since. Okay. All right. We'll just call you Coach David then. So Coach, thank you for being on today and sharing your insight. This is a topic this is one where coaches get out your pen, paper, lean forward, because I think you guys are going to be in for a treat today to talk about the what David calls the third element, if I could use that term that we just talked about. We coach the X's and O's and in physical performance, but we don't touch upon the mental performance, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So David, love to hear your background, share it with the coaches, and we'll dive in.
Great, thanks for having me, Bill. And I must admit that your practice plan saved me, so I appreciate that, and I look
Awesome.
forward to using
Good to hear. Good to
bringing it
hear. I love it.
I'm a psychologist by trade. I'm a high performance psychologist who's practiced my craft in a couple different arenas. So I've been a university professor teaching executive MBAs for about 23 years. I've also done a lot of leadership consulting for C-suite leaders. So I've helped seat a lot of CEOs and other leaders in Fortune 500 companies. But my real passion area is in this area of peak performance psychology. And currently I'm a peak performance coach where we use science to train people to enjoy the pursuit of what's possible in their lives. And then how does that relate to youth hoops? Well, it's important because that's the foundation. So I started off as a 5'0" scrappy point guard back in the day. And my claim to fame, I think, was putting up 54 points in a college intramural game. So in the other guy's defense, they probably had a party beforehand, and I didn't go, but I still had to put the ball in the hoop.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's my background in a nutshell. I've always had a passion for sports. I did a startup a few years ago focusing on this as well, which I can talk a little bit about as well. But my ultimate goal is really, no matter which arena I'm playing in, it's to help people untap the potential that's in them and using science and best practices to do so.
Yeah. Well, and let's dive into that a little bit. I mean, we're coming out of COVID, and I hear a lot, including the teams that I coach, about, I don't know if maybe, I don't want to call it issues, or maybe issues is the right word, that the transition from coming out of COVID into now back to quote unquote normal life. And I'm seeing the impact on young people in that transition. For example, the boys at my high school, the freshman boys, they're really having a hard time because they're not mature. They missed 2 years of grade school, and so they're ninth graders acting like seventh graders, and it's a real problem. So that's one area. So why don't we start there, and then obviously we're going to transition this into sports and what coaches can do to help, overcome, the missed game-winning free throw, and and all of those types of things that we can help kids through. So why don't we start with that kind of, because I think there's kind of post coaching before, or pre-coaching before COVID, and post coaching, there's a slight difference, and maybe I'm completely wrong. So maybe you can.
No, Bill, you're hitting something that us in the psychology field have been sounding alarm bells on. And that is what has happened to the developmental learning
Hmm.
of kids this age who are social beings, and they need to mingle, and that's how they learn from making mistakes, and then largely at home. So it has been said, this isn't my original idea, but I believe as well that our next great pandemic, we're in it, and when it comes to mental health, it is fear of failure,
Oh my
fear of other
gosh, yeah.
people's opinions. And
Fear of
so
what? What was that last part? Fear of what?
FOPO, fear of other people's opinions.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And it is just prevalent. So, for example, I was trying to recruit fifth grade girls real quick, and the line I kept getting was, "Oh, I look like a fool. Oh, I'm not as good as so and so," as opposed to earlier when, "Yeah, sign me up. Let's get after this."
Yeah.
And so I think as coaches, as parents,
Yeah.
take the psychology hat off, and just on the human level, I think our job is to help kind of level set kids in terms of understanding that this fear, because they haven't been able to have their social networks, they don't have the skills, and so far they're so afraid of other people's opinions that they can't process, and they tend to shrink under pressure as opposed to rise. So what can we do? One is to make sure that as coaches, we're constantly building up the confidence. There's several ways from science we can do that. Constantly build a culture where it's fun, but they're growing in their skills. Doubling down on team building,
Hmm.
perhaps introducing a little variety every now and then besides just drills and X's and O's. So how can we connect more on a human level? So during practice, do you perhaps interject for some team building things 5 minutes in that are non-basketball related, and just
What's an
get them.
example of that? Because I think that's really key, and really important part of it, because it does break up. So again, there's a difference between a coach who coaches once a week, right, and sees their kids once a week, versus a coach who's doing it like myself 5 days a week, 6 days a week. Really, I'm with those kids. The only day off is Sunday. So I'd like to take each of those and maybe dive into, because I think those in there, that's where the nuggets are that will definitely help coaches. So talking about culture and talking about, injecting fun, maybe just give some examples or ideas of those things that you just mentioned.
Sure. So let's say culture. Every coach wants to build a great culture.
Yeah.
Most coaches will say, "I want to build a winning culture." I think that's a little bit narrow in terms of a dashboard of success. That's great if it comes, but I think we need other elements that are important for kids. I want a culture where kids come leave with a smile on their face. I want a culture where kids, I can see effort increasing. At the fifth grade level, I could care less if we win or lose. It's nice for them. But if they are truly improving their effort. So it's kind of setting the stage of what is our dashboard of success.
Hmm.
And culture is the house in which our athletes play. And simply put, culture is, the behavior we tolerate. So when someone makes a mistake or doesn't, if someone's at a different skill level, how do we build those up who quite aren't there yet, as opposed to shooting them a look or knocking them down?
Hmm.
So do we constantly give them that attention, and notice that as coaches, and notice that it's not a one size all approach, that we have to have our radar on for different athletes and how they perceive it and where they are on the court. So what I like to get to is the common denominator. And the common denominator that we need to focus on at coaches are, what's the well-being of these kids? And well-being is, they're coming here to hang out and have fun.
Yeah.
They're coming here to hopefully win a couple games or more. It's different as you go up in high school, I understand, but
Yeah.
just the common denominator. So what do we do as coaches to foster that environment of fun, learning, and building grits and getting after it as well? And I
That's
think
right.
that's where the secret sauce lies.
Yeah, and no doubt about that. And I think, and it's this constant balancing act of all of those things together. Because like you said, and it doesn't change at the high school, it's just, we emphasize maybe winning a little bit more, but fun, culture, the well-being of the kids is so important. And I live in an area where, if you don't have a 3.8 GPA, you have no hope, no future, right? And so there's that stress as well, right? So that, there's the grades, athletic performance, and what what do you suggest to help with that balance of winning, grit, culture, fun. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And so I think an easy approach is just to go back to simple terms and set expectations at the outset. So I've taken teams through the process of coming up with their one word, and we'll sit teams down and we'll ask them, what is it? What do we have to do as a team to achieve our goals?
Hmm.
I don't want to hear wins. I don't want to hear scoring averages. I don't want to hear any stats. What I want to hear is the interpersonal stickiness that's going to bind us together. How are we going to treat each other as
Hmm.
teammates to build this culture? So I start there with teams. We've done this a lot with high school teams, and they're looking at me like I have three eyes. But we take them through the process, and things come up like, all right, I'm always going to show up with my A game. I'm always going to, I don't care if I'm the captain or the last person on the bench, I'm going to show up and lead from where I'm at. And everybody leads in different ways.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
going to do my part in the classroom so that my teammates can count on me so that I'm not going to get suspended or have to miss a game. When I see someone struggle, it's my job to step up and be the first one to get the water bottle or the first one to put the balls back on the rack. So it's all these types of interpersonal things that we set expectations early in the season. And that's the framework. And then as a coach, we have just defined our values, our culture. And
Yeah.
as a coach, I reinforce those by calling people out who've modeled it each day. And that's how you start to build culture the right way. And then the wins, those things take care of themselves and those are easy to track. But
Right.
it's the hard stuff.
It's a
But
hard, yeah.
but getting people engaged. So if you do it alone as a coach, it's a losing battle. You have to have the kids come up with these, and oftentimes they'll come up with 5 to 7 of these core values, and I try to distill it to perhaps 3 or 5, so it's easy to manage. Whether it's equal talk time or a safe space for everybody to fail and turn failure into learning. So we don't talk failure, we talk learning. And they come up with these, and then we just live by it and it's simple and it builds the culture over time. And then try to spend, whether it's 25% of your time focused on that metric, and then some of it specifically on efforts, and then skills, and then the wins. Those take care of themselves.
Yeah, they'll take care of themselves. Well, and you bring up a good point too, because one of the things I always say is 80% of what I do is I coach confidence. And I put that lens on it. And 20% is basketball, putting the little ball in the hoop, right? And if I put that lens on it, it helps me. But sometimes then I feel like I'm soft
Yeah.
when I coach, like, because I like when you and I were growing up, you know, as a coach, it's my way or there's the door,
Yeah.
right? And yelling was expected, right? You did it out of fear or getting cut or whatever it was. That's changed, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, because now the door is often inviting for people because there's so many other options compared
right,
to what you and I had as kids.
right. Yeah,
So the options are just incredible. And then also it's just bad psychology. It's bad coaching when it's my way or the highway.
yeah.
So to flip it. So I'm curious, how do you coach confidence? What are some tactics that you use?
Well, I talk about either if I'm training an individual or I'm working with the team, I always tell them this is a safe place to make mistakes. I reinforce that over and over again. This is a safe place to make mistakes. Nobody has their camera out. It's not your mistakes aren't going to be posted, right?
Mhm.
We're here to learn, right? And I say, I'm a teacher, you're a student, you're learning the game. I said, but I'm also learning from you, right?
Yeah.
And and that's again, it's a balancing. I said, but at the end of the day, I still have to make the decision. The decision is on me. I'll listen, and I give them a voice in the whole process. I at least try to, so they're empowered to and feel comfortable to have that voice. But it's gotten me also into a little bit of, what do I want to say? I don't say trouble is the right word, but it's more about the constant complaining and blaming that it somewhat turned into where I had to have a discussion about it the other day in practice. I brought the JV team, varsity team together and said, we're in this together. This is one team, you know.
Mhm.
My coaching staff works really hard, right? We're not, believe it or not, we're not out to get you, right? We're here to support. And I mean, I tell you, I have the best, nicest, warm coaching staff that I have ever been a part of.
Mhm.
And they're very, they're parents, most of them are parents, had kids, or now some of them even have grandkids, right? So that's one of the things that we, have to deal with or dealt with. Um, and I think that goes back to, I don't know if that's a COVID related thing, where, I'm going to blame you, I'm going to blame somebody else. I'm not taking the blame. That's human nature also,
Sure, sure.
you know. But I'm going to step back a bit too, because I'm going to tell you what we do as from a culture standpoint, which I'm kind of excited what you said. It just gives me this sense of relief of like, I don't know if I was doing the right thing, but here's what I did. So we call our culture red dot. It's the red dot way or the red dot pride. We're Cougars.
Mhm.
We talk about pride. So it stands for, there's two bits. The red part is the basketball stuff, and the dot part is the kind of the intangible, more of the culture-y stuff that you would normally expect. So
Okay.
red is rebound, efficient scoring, and defense. Those are the three most important things that we want to do on the basketball side. Okay.
Yep.
And then on the other part is drive, open, together. So drive, and you see drive and open, those are two basketball terms as well, right? So
Absolutely.
but what it means, drive is energy, effort, and attitude, right? Your coach, or your, yeah, open is you're coachable. And of course, together is, hey, we're one team, we're trying to figure this out, we do things together, we win together, we lose together, right? That type of attitude. And then at the end of every practice, a player picks the red dot winner for the day. And
Hmm.
they literally get a red dot, a sticker.
Yeah.
Actually, I have them right here. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, they get a red dot, and then they obviously they have their names, and then they put a sticker next to their name. And then every week or 2 weeks, what I do is I give out a prize to the red dot winner, and it's a red ball, a little stress ball with a smiley face on it, and
Yeah.
a one of those bracelets that have drive, open, together written around it, right? So just to reinforce that culture, um, and it sounds like what you were saying, that's exactly what you should be doing.
No, yeah, you have all of the great ingredients there to build that culture and reinforce them on their levels. So that's really good. And then one point we talked a little bit about confidence here, and
Yeah,
confidence is often a tricky thing at that age. So what happens is for confidence to happen, we really need to be in the right emotional state. And when we're dealing with little kids and big emotions, oftentimes they don't manage them. So what I tend to say is oftentimes as humans, we're living in the past where we ruminate, and we're living in the future where we're anxious.
yeah.
Our job then as coaches is to bring them into the present moment.
Mm,
And when they're in the present moments, the past becomes noise and the future becomes background noise. And we can be here, we can coach. So setting the stage for the emotions. And what happens with kids and emotions is oftentimes they have a short runway. So something bad's happened. A friend said something bad about me, or I screwed up and dribbled the ball out of bounds.
yeah,
And they hit the wall quickly and
yeah,
then they melt down. What we need to do as coaches is extend this zone of tolerance so they can handle emotions and interject when things don't go right. That's all right. And that calm approach you just described helps elongate their emotional bandwidth so that when something goes wrong, they have the runway to stop and deal with it and pull themselves out before they hit the wall. And when we do that, what happens? That creates an opportunity to coach confidence.
mm,
And confidence can come from a lot of places. I mean, research suggests there's 4 or 5 main sources of it. One is mastery of prior experience. Have I done it well?
mm,
That's where most of us coaches tend to park and get the experience. You get confidence. That's just one piece.
yeah,
We should also do modeling. So show them how to do it, and then have other players do it. So modeling is a tremendous way to increase confidence. Another source of confidence is verbal persuasion. So, are we using positive, accurate feedback to get them where they're going or have to go. Because feedback can be a double-edged sword if it's
Yeah,
delayed.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, a fourth source of confidence then is what is their emotional or psychological state? So I talked about this window of tolerance for our emotions. So
Hmm.
what are we doing as coaches to get them in the right frame of mind, knowing that perhaps after practice they're starving to death, they have homework,
Yeah,
whatever it is. So how do we get them? And that's where I think
exactly.
taking time for non-basketball stuff for 5 minutes, little team building, whether it's two truths and a lie, whether it's we did the phone game, we whisper in one person's ear and they have to go down 15 players and see if
So
the message is
interesting.
the same at the end. Um, or just simple things like that. Stretching, breath work is great. So those are ways we can alter as coaches their
Hmm.
emotional and physiological state to get them in a more coachable mindset.
And do you do that? Are you saying some of these you kind of make, are you looking at it as bookends too, where you might, let's say do breathing exercises to start practice, and I'm assuming, and maybe there is no order of this, but like start practice, get in the right frame of mind, because actually one thing that I've been noticing is, sometimes we have early practices right after school, so school ends at 3:30. We have practice at 3:45, and that's not because I want that, it's because of gym time, right?
Right,
We
right.
start at 3:45, we go to our 2 hours, and then we're out. Right, they just got done with school, 8 hours or 6 hours, friends, issues, homework, tests, blah, and now I got to say perform, go, right? uh or they just, like, yesterday gal came in and she's like, I just woke up from a nap, and it was, what time we had practice yesterday? 6:30.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And she was like, I slept for whatever time she slept for. And right. So I know they're tired, but then pressure's on me. It's like, as a parent, I just, some days I just want to just like, okay, forget practice. We're not going to do it. And then game time comes, and, then I have that going in my head, like, we got it. We're not ready. Yeah, we're not ready for this next game. Right. So it's just like this constant tug of war that is happening in my head as well, of hearing what they're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also knowing the job at hand that we have to do.
Yeah, it's tough. So there's simple things. We can simplify this process a lot. And
Mhm.
part of it, I'll say, is as a peak performance coach, I know we can control the mind through the body.
Yeah.
And through the body, it's breath work. So look at what all the athletes do we see before a big shot. They take a deep breath and they reset it. So what's happening
Yeah.
physiologically is when kids are wired and kids are bouncing off walls, we have their sympathetic nervous system wiring. It's like in a car where they're in first or second gear and they're just revving the engine, and they're constantly going.
Yeah.
We have to do as coaches then is get them out of that revving state, that
Yeah. Okay.
sympathetic nervous system,
Yeah.
into the parasympathetic, which calms the body. And breath work, visualization is a great method to do
Mhm.
that. And then also the cadence of flow. So a lot of times practices should be set up so that you can kind of ride the up and the down, the up
Yep.
and the down, because we have a whole physiology going inside of us. And it's our job to kind of surf those biorhythms of our
Mm.
biology, as
Mhm.
opposed to just jamming more action-packed things down them. So how do we space water breaks? How do we space? I'm a big fan of these 5 minute little team huddles of sorts and teach a concept. And take advantage of how our body naturally goes, and then interject some of these leadership or mindset skills amongst the practice.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's actually really good. Uh,
Yeah. So
yeah.
for example, on the
Yeah.
coaches I gave to the fifth grade girls, I redid it last night.
Uh,
I have practice plus a leadership lesson. So
okay.
this week I'm doing practice plus confidence. Next one, practice plus communication.
So what
And
does that mean? Can you give us an example of what you would do? You teach, or you coach fifth grade girls.
yeah,
So what would that look like for that age group? I know you have my practice plan, so
yep,
what do we
yeah.
do on the leadership?
So yeah, so for the confidence, I'm going to simplify it, and I gave you 4 out of the 5 sources already.
Yeah.
And the fifth one was visualization.
Okay.
So from science, I know that there's all these proven ways to get people more confident. I'm going to bring Sesame Street into it for the girls and say confidence comes down to one thing: your self-talk. So what is the voice in your head telling you? And
Hmm.
all those other sources lead into self-talk. mastery of experience, social persuasion, monkey see, monkey do, all those things. So it's self-talk. So back to your question about coming out of COVID and where kids' fear is and anxiety and confidence, I'm going to start tapping that and say, let's listen to the little voice in our head. There's going to be, the voice that says, I'm not good enough. I can't do
Yep.
this. You're just a learner. So I'm going to say, yes, you can. So you just can't do it yet.
Yeah, that's
But
what
in
I would
3 weeks, let's see where you're at. So I'm a big fan of the word yet.
I don't let I always call it the C word. Can't say the C word.
Yeah.
Can't, right?
Yep. Exactly.
So,
And then give them small wins and reinforce them. So it's really not being a coach, but being a teacher and being a cheerleader more so than anything else. And just so I'm going to talk about the positive mindset, have them share examples of what that voice in them is saying, and then also reward them at the end of practice, whoever helps other people with positive self-talk throughout the drills. When they miss a shot and say, don't worry, you'll make the next one. Or
mm,
they fall flat on their face, don't worry, you won't do that again. And
mhm.
just reinforce it throughout that week's practice. And then each week there's a theme. So growth mindset, conflict resolution, team focus, the list goes on, and positivity.
Yeah, that's amazing because that's such a big thing, and I never put words to it or a structure like that, but I always try to be as positive I can. No, I'm human. I do get frustrated when I teach them something, 5 times, and then they do the opposite of that, which we just talked about doing, right? And that's frustrating, right? And I try to like take a deep breath, right? And I say I try. I'm not perfect at it if my players are listening, right? I'm still working on it.
Sure.
But that's such a good thing in the breathing. So I'll tell you what I do. I do this when the ball is on our bench side, when our girls are shooting a free throw. First thing I always say is, I just look at them, breathe,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
go out. That's all I say. And then I see them do it, fill their lungs, and then, right? Because they
Yeah.
forget to breathe. And I also talk about how find those moments in a game where you can breathe, right?
Mhm.
And we talk about, okay, well, let's talk about them. Where are those moments? Obviously, free throw.
Yeah.
When you're shooting or lining up, that's a moment to breathe,
Yeah.
right? Or in transition, when you just busted your tail to get back, and now you're waiting for the offense or the defense, right, the ball to come up, or right, just take a quick breath. It doesn't take much. It's not like
No.
you're sitting there, just okay, I'm ready, right? And breathe out. So it's something I'm gonna keep on reinforcing. I don't do it enough. I used to do it a lot more. It's kind of those habits that you forget, but
Yeah.
I
And
like
even
that.
in a timeout, the whole team can spend
Time out.
15,
Yeah.
20 seconds.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
a routine. Or when hands in and we're ready to go, go whoever, let's take a
Yeah.
deep breath first and do it.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's where the science is at, right? So our job is, I tell this to C-suite leaders, I tell this to fifth grade girls, right? It's breath. That's where it's at. That's the one thing we can control in those moments. And the idea is we're creating more of a runway for us to handle the emotions
Yeah.
and respond more appropriately for the situation at hand.
Yeah. 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 And are there tools, or what would you suggest? Because one of the things is bouncing back from mistakes, bouncing back from misses, bouncing back from blown assignments, whatever it might be, right? Uh, what would you suggest? What's a tool that you could give a young person?
Great question. So, we always talked about the next play attitude.
Yep.
For adults, kids aren't driving, but I always say, do you drive your car looking through the rear view mirror? You're
Mm.
going to crash. So the analogy is, how do we focus on the here and now? So as I talked about earlier, we often think about the past, near term. Oh, I screwed up, and
Mm.
then we're in this cycle of I'm not showing up for the present. So that's the first thing: is don't have a rear view mirror.
Mm.
Just rip it out and go and next play. And that's what the great athletes do.
Yeah.
So it may not translate, it might be really good with the 15, 16-year-old boys and girls, but maybe not the
Yeah.
younger. So the other aspect is, a famous psychologist said, don't should on yourself. I
Right.
should have did this. I should have did that. The woulda,
Right.
coulda, shoulda gets us in trouble. So the idea is rather than shooting on ourselves, how can I focus on, boy, I turned failure into learning. And
Mhm.
that was a great opportunity. And I know I can adjust and pivot the next time around. So if I just got burned off the dribble, maybe next time I'm going to force the opponent to the weak hand. Or maybe next time I'm going to set a better screen so the pick can be more clear. And then another tip we'll give people, so rear view mirror, don't shoot on yourself. And then I'd also say keep your emotions in check. We're all human. So at least once a practice, I missed a shot just to show them I'm human. It's tough to miss it. But no, I joke.
Well,
But
especially 54 points, coach. Come on.
oh yeah,
I'm the
yeah.
opposite. I always say when I miss, I say, coach never misses. And
Yeah,
they're like, yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, yeah, right, right, right. Never misses. I'm
No,
like, and then I always say, did I ever miss a shot in practice? And they're like, no, coach, never,
yeah,
make a
so
joke about it.
I'm the opposite. It's been 30 years since I played shot a ball, so I'm around 5% making them now. So, but the idea is sometimes just showing how not to do something in practice. So I'm a big fan of
Hmm.
what we call in the business world critical incidents when we train people. A critical incident is something really great, something average, and something poor.
Hmm.
So in practice, I like to mirror those so that they can see it. And then when they do something wrong, I go, oh, great example of the low end. Now let's move up to the average end.
Oh, so you do point that out in that way. Because I do that and I sometimes I stop and think, oh, I just pointed out a mistake. Is that the right thing to do?
Feedback is wonderful if it's delivered accurately and it's delivered with positivity, and I want to build you up. So we all crave the ability to get better, and
Right.
feedback is a most important tool we have in that regard. But how coaches deliver it oftentimes misses the mark.
Hmm.
So I like to focus on feedback's an opportunity for the technical aspects. And let's just pause here because if one player is not getting it, I guarantee you half the team isn't.
Right.
So let's just go over it again. That's that monkey see, monkey do approach
Okay.
to building confidence.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, a lot of times we have on that same vein is, you know, players who aren't getting the playing time that they think they deserve, not deserve, or want, maybe want, they want, everybody wants to play. They don't want to sit on the bench, right? And, as you know, in any team, it's a spectrum, right? You have really good players to ones that need more work overall. And you try to find, I mean, I always try to find spaces for everybody at some
Mhm.
point in the game, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. Okay. So, and obviously that hurts their self-confidence, which little do they know. I mean, and I tell them that it hurts me too, right? I got to do a better job of leveling you up and getting where you need to be. But okay, so the question in here is um that I get asked is what from a player, what do I need to do
Yeah.
to be better? Because I told them, I instructed them, don't ask me what do I need to do better to get more playing time. I'm like, that's the question is what do I need to do better? Or what can I do to make me better? Right. And the team better.
Yeah. So great question and not an easy answer.
Yeah.
So I'm still in the age where equal playing time is a rule. So I'm
Yep.
I'm stuck there.
That's
But
great. Yep.
without that, the question is, as a coach, how do I set up a dashboard of success that just isn't focused on playing time?
Yeah.
And so this is where I introduce concepts of leadership and a team first culture.
Mm.
So you may have heard of a great study done by a Stanford business professor, a psychologist, and he looked at all the tape of NBA teams. And what he found was that the Golden State Warriors had more high fives and other body touches, chest bumps, et cetera, than any other team. And so the premise is that he thinks it's the actual touch that causes. I'm not sure that's it. What I think is that it's the physical touch, doing those little things. I got your back. Good job. Facilitates the great team chemistry that gets us to the greater wins. So that's an avenue where we can take it off playing time and say, hey, we're all in this. We have to build each other up.
Mhm.
So we all have a role to play. It's my job as coach to make sure that you do get some playing time. Obviously, we don't want someone riding the pine the whole time. But
Yeah.
how do we do that? And then how do we celebrate their wins? So if someone only gets 3 minutes a game, how do we build them up for that 3 minutes and point out what they did good? And then have the flexibility and the wisdom as a coach to say, all right, perhaps we're playing a lesser opponent. This is a moment where I can get this person 10 minutes of playing time.
Yeah.
And I'm building their skills, and it's just not all performance based. It's how am I building, getting this kid excited and passionate. And then sometimes matchups, or sometimes we just need all hands out there. We have different roles at different times, but they're all equally important. So the
Mm.
person getting the towels, the person getting the water bottles is just as important as the person who dropped 24 points.
Yeah.
That, that's the culture. And then perhaps in practice, I like to use practice as an opportunity to highlight some folks as well who might be second or third teamers, and perhaps let them run drills. And
Mm-hmm.
then have my first teamers perhaps work on defense or other areas and mix it around. We have that flexibility.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think those roles are really important. You know, even what I always tell everybody is when you're on the bench, you play a really important role. That's a role. You're not you're in the game, right? You know, they think that, oh, I'm sitting over here, I'm not in the game. I mean, you're in the game. You're one, I give them a task of watching the shot clock. We have a shot clock here, right? So they have to watch a shot clock. When it gets to a certain point, we have a trigger word on offense. We have a trigger word. They're 100% responsible for calling that trigger word out when it gets there. So they have to alert the players that are in, right, when it's time to, like, okay, you know, or it's 10 seconds left. Holy cow, we need to score. We need to do something, right? So, you know, that's one of their roles. Cheerleading is a huge role. I assigned one of my assistant coaches to the bench coach, right? Where one of their jobs is to make sure players are engaged, but teach them how to be engaged when they're sitting on the bench. What does that mean, right? And then the um how you sit on the bench is important, right? Are you moping because you just got, you know, out of the game, or you're not in the game? You know, what's your body language saying? And that's what I always preach, probably not the right word, talk about is, you know, your nonverbal is just as loud as your verbal.
Yeah. No, Coach Gino from UConn has a
Yeah.
great video out there. You can YouTube it. But he's going off after a game and talking about the importance of body language. And he says, when I'm recruiting a player, and this could be the greatest female athlete in the country, but her body language is poor, she will not be playing for UConn.
Yeah, I
And
saw
goes
that.
on and stresses. So what we tell kids about it is always have this positive body language. Stand tall, take a deep breath, shoulders relaxed up. So it's important, and I'll highlight examples. So I recently went to a women's volleyball, college volleyball game here in town, and I think only about a third of the players made the game time, from what I could tell. Maybe a few more, maybe half. But I was just watching the ones on the sidelines, and they were like, it was just incredible, just smiles and
Mm,
hugs and high fives. It's the culture. And so I asked one of the players, said, what's the secret sauce for you guys? It's just amazing that you just ooze enthusiasm, and the crowd fed off it. And she goes, vulnerability. We focus on, we're
mm.
human beings, and how do we share ourselves authentically and know that we feel safe here. And they work on it with team building exercises
That's
each
interesting.
day.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that way they can show up as their worst and know that the team has their back. And
Well, bring that down to that. Bring that, you know, because that's the feedback I always hear. I mean, we can model after college, but then I'm like, come on, coach, I don't have a staff to, like, think through the leadership pieces, and I'm a high school coach, or I'm a fifth grade girls coach.
yeah,
So how can we bring that down? Because I think that is so important in today's culture of you know, all my snaps are perfect. My Instagram is perfect. I got the perfect filter, perfect, 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 right? And then you look at that and you're like, oh, I'm not that perfect, but man, she's perfect or he's perfect.
it's tough. So I know I experienced that with my Facebook when I wasn't active on Facebook. All 7 of my followers were really disappointed. Just kidding. But for kids, it's real.
Yeah, it's real.
It is so real. So having a no phone policy is one thing. Stressing the
Yep.
importance of we are here together as a team, and this is our family is important.
Mhm.
And then how do we make it real in terms of getting rid of that fear, right?
Yeah.
So I'll go back to my original concept of the present, the future, and the
Yeah.
past. We're present here.
Mm-hmm.
And then oftentimes I'll do challenges we've done this at the high school level. Can you go a week without social media? Oh my
Ha.
goodness. But the goal is to build grit, a mental toughness, and that's
Yeah.
fun. And these athletes love to do that. So I like to challenge them. And I challenge them and say, all right, I want you before next practice to go talk to the teacher who just handed you your test back and you failed. And what I want you to do is have this critical conversation. That's mental toughness. And
Mm.
then come back to me and report what the conversation is and the action plan to improve. Another thing you can build grit is I want you to go without social media, let's say for 2 days. Let's be realistic with the
Yeah.
kids. And that's grit. It's not just
Yeah.
physical. Or I want you to apply for that job or you're too scared, that part-time job. So it's all these types of things to build grit. That's how we can bring it down to the level.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do fun stuff. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'm going to try to have the girls bounce the ball in unison as if they're like Blue Man Group or something. And
Right,
they,
right, right, right.
so I don't care how good they are, but it's like a dance. The
Yeah.
first time was a miserable failure, but
That's
that's my
awesome, though.
goal after
Yeah.
2 months is can they at least bounce in unison? And that is something
Huh.
fun.
Well, you know
Uh,
what I've done, and I need to bring this back, and the only reason I stopped was because of COVID last year, is we call them comfort zone challenges, which do build grit. So a couple challenges might be, and they had fun with it, and it was really interesting to see the dynamic. So we would go to a shopping area, and you had to challenge a stranger to rock, paper, scissors.
I love it.
And then the player, they kept track of wins and losses, and they had to do it. And I paired them with, okay, who this exercise, who's it going to be really easy for to approach someone? And I paired them with somebody who was like, I do not want to talk to anybody. You know what I mean? And I paired them together, and I said, each of you have to alternate who approaches the
Yeah.
person. So that was one of them. We also did the one that's, again, these are for some students are tough. And I did, by the way, this is not a high school thing. This is grade school as well. I did this with grade school.
Yeah.
I think I started in 5th or 6th grade all the way up. And the other karaoke, they had to sing. They had to find and challenge someone or sing with someone, right?
I
And they,
love it.
they had to explain why we're doing it, what's it for, right? To build confidence and grit, and they had, and then they had to record it too, right? That was
Mhm.
the other thing. They had to record even the rock, paper, scissors. So I knew that, player A and player B both did it, right?
Those are great ideas, very creative. And what you're doing is you're building team cohesion and team chemistry
Yeah.
outside of basketball drills. And you're meeting them where they're at, fun, lighthearted things. So I've been known to go in with ropes and blindfolds, and I
Okay.
put blindfolds on them and I drop a rope, and they're in fours, and I drop a rope and they have to make a perfect square out of it. It's hard because one rope is 100 feet. Another rope is that yellow twine that just binds up on you. And then they all have different things. Some of them just have tons of knots in, so they're struggling. Some are done right away. But the idea is how can we communicate? How can we work together with different senses? And we're building
Oh
fun.
my
And then,
gosh, I'm going to steal that one.
yeah, it's one of my favorites.
And you do that as one team? All players are blindfolded?
Yes, in groups of four, and they have to make a
Okay.
perfect square. So I bring enough number of players divided by four. That's how many
Got it.
ropes you bring in blind. And it's just so simple, and it allows for communication to occur. It allows for frustration to bubble up, and then we talk about conflict resolution.
Oh my goodness.
And it's just the way these are the non-basketball things that might take 5-10 minutes, and
Yeah.
it's great ground for us to get out of. Oh my goodness, as a coach, I can breathe and not think about, all right, what am I going to do for my defensive drill? How am I going to teach these kids to do a layup off the 1 foot and shoot with the opposite hand? They're not coordinated enough. And then, let me just pause. So they're doing that stuff, and it gives us coaches a
Yeah.
chance to do state management for us, catch our breath so that we can show up our best for the next drill, because we're constantly grinding in first and second gear, revving the engine. We also need to come down so that we can shift through the gears properly ourselves, because coaching is about managing energy first in
Mhm.
ourselves and then with our team second.
That's it. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that. Coaching is about managing energy because it's so true. And one of the things there's as a group, there's different personalities on the team, but a lot of times what you see is one personality across the group, right? And what I mean by that is I don't have the rah players this year.
Mhm.
They're all just pretty mellow.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a rah guy, and again, my players they don't see that side of me. Like when I'm not coaching, I'm goofy and all these other things, right? And I feel like, and this is my issue I'm dealing with, is I got to be this stoic coach, right? With all the answers and all the wisdom, and I try to, I let them try to see that side of me. But to that point is sometimes I walk in the locker room and I just want to jump around and scream and like, let's go, and they're like, I'm looking, what's wrong? Oh, we're tired, right? Or I just, they're not as a group
Yeah.
just overly excited. Now, I think that's also like, I don't know if that is confidence and like the newer players are seeing what the older players are doing and they're just kind of trying to fit into the box that the older players have already established. And you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, a lot there to unpack.
I know.
Part of it is culture. So how do we set the culture?
Yeah.
So another thought that comes to mind is a square peg in a round hole. So if they're just not the cheerleader type, how do we adjust
Yeah. How do
and
we
meet them
adjust?
where they're at?
Yeah.
Or is that just our assumption and we do have to draw it out of them? And then you kind of mentioned sometimes there's a strong personality or two and others. So I think managing on that aspect of the energy part is we don't want to take a bunch of introverts and try to turn them into extroverts and
Yeah.
a type. So there's different ways, and I like to, what's the old phrase from Michelangelo or whoever it was, on stone, and I just got rid of all the stone and David appeared, right? The stone. So that kind of thing. So as coaches, how are we getting rid of that and letting their true self come out?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the cheerleader type. Other times I just lock arms. And if I can get people to lock arms, that's a more powerful form of solidarity for them. Might not be my cup of tea, it might be, but it's about them and meeting them where they're at. But if we have really low levels, I teach this whole science of flow or peak performance or
Yeah.
runner's high. And the idea is if people are too down, they're bored. If they're too high, they're too excited or agitated. We want to find the midpoint of this flow corridor or flow zone. So our
Yeah.
job as coaches is to get them there, not too much, not too little, but to figure out where they're at. And that's an art in addition to a science.
Oh my gosh, coach, you're at one, I mean, this is amazing conversation so far. And like I said, I mean, I have a couple pages of notes, but then I realized, hey, this is being recorded, so I'm just going to listen to this 5 times. Uh, but yeah, this is exactly. So here's a question for you that I had in my mind. Okay, can you said, we train the X's and O's, we train the physical, right, the physical side. Now you're talking about the mental side, the third element. Okay. Can you what is the percentage or weight you would give those? And can you have just like a really solid mentally tough team who maybe their athletic ability isn't there, beat a team that's just the reverse? You know what I mean? I mean, I know anything is possible, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
is the mental part so strong that we often overlook it that it makes up for a lot of maybe our lack of ability,
Yeah.
physical ability, I mean, right?
So, if we can only train three things, our body, our crafts, and our mind, it's
Hmm.
just amazing at how we have failed to train the mind. So,
Hmm.
I mean, did you ever have a class on emotional intelligence or minds? Me either.
Yes.
So, the closest education has come is really growth mindsets, and
Yeah,
then people have
exactly.
faltered. That's a
Yeah.
big, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, if that at all. So we did this study to kind of level set to answer your question. I guess that we'll take the scenic route. Is when we created this app and we wanted to teach that third element, we went into a high school and we talked to the principal. Said, "Hey, we're going to give this to you free. In exchange, can you give us a couple hundred students?" So he gave us 100 who used our app for about 3 months and 100 who did not use the app for 3 months.
Okay.
And in that 3 months, those that used it, they got weekly lessons And teachers actually kind of baked it in time for class to do it. And then we went and did some seminars. And what we found was incredible achievement. So for the males, we found about a 25% increase in their ability to lead, their perceptions. We found about, I think it was 28% increase in their confidence to overcome fear of failure. For females, this is where it got good. For females, we saw almost double that improvement. We saw about 47 pushing 50% increase in their ability that, yeah, I can step up and be a leader no matter where I'm at. About 40% increase in confidence to overcome fear of failure. So to me, by having these short 5-10 minute conversations, it leads to benefits that make them better kids, better people, set them up for success. And our tagline was, we teach the skills that last after the ball stops bouncing. So when I'm a coach and I realize I can't get these kids to make a regulation length free throw, but when I move them 3 feet in, I'm not a failure. It's just physical strength. But if I taught them how to dim those voices of I'm not good enough, I can't do this, as opposed to, hey, I'm just going to go make a fool of myself. I'm going to do it. And then after 20 shots, I made one. That's a huge win. And I see the smile on their face. So now back to your question of percentages. I treat this mental element as a blood flowing through our veins. It's always there.
Yeah.
But we don't see it. So it has to be, and how do I show up as a coach and the messages I give? How do I set the expectations? How do I deliver feedback when I'm tired? After my first practice, my wife snapped a picture of me falling asleep on the floor without a pillow or anything. I was zonked. I had no energy. So how am I going to manage that the next practice round, knowing that I don't have the energy I used to? And so sometimes it's just writing out 5 positive things I can say today, making sure that each girl hears it one-on-one from me, one of those 5 statements, one-on-one throughout the practice. Some might hear it more. And then how can I set the expectation on each, before we start? The word of the day or the leadership theme of the day is confidence. I'm going to spend 60 seconds talking about self-talk. All right, let's get into drills. And then at the end, let's reward people where they showcased it. It's just built into how we conduct ourselves, how we think, and then our ultimate goal beyond just the X's and O's and scoreboard.
Amazing. And I'm glad you addressed the male versus female piece too. Is it, I mean, especially when in coaching, do we have different challenges? Coaches who coach females versus coaches who coach males?
Yes, I would assume so. Different motives at the different stage. Boys may be perhaps more interested in some of the external glory and rewards, and for girls, it might be more of the internal social drivers. So some and connections, perhaps broad stereotypes or generalizations there.
Yeah, exactly.
But as a coach, then we have to dive in and kind of assess what those needs are. So I think every coach could spend the first practice, there's a parents meeting and then there's a team meeting. And that team meeting is going through the culture and asking, what are 3 things that would make this season a success for you, and have them write it down. Yeah. And oftentimes I find that it is, I want better friendships. I want to learn a new skill. I rarely see state championship. I rarely see leading the conference in points. It's all the human level stuff. So that's a simple 15-minute exercise for a coach to figure out what the needs and desires are of the players. And then our responsibility to kind of catalog those and meet each athlete individually. And then as a coach, look at those broad themes and say, all right, they're here mostly for fun. So maybe I'm going to double down on a team building exercise, or maybe I'm going to encourage them to do something in the community that bonds them, or, give back. And maybe I'll de-emphasize that extra drill I had on, defense or a zone. So it's those adjustments we can make to meet them where they're at and keep them excited.
Yeah, that's really important, and I'm glad you brought that up too. Yeah, we do community building exercises as well. So, and I think now that we're out of COVID, we did it last year because it didn't really require too much interaction we did a shoe drive, right? So people just had to drop their shoes off and we could do that. And,
very cool.
Huge success, right? So it doesn't take much. And even when I was doing the younger grades of 5th and 6th graders, we always did a community activity together because I think it's really important to give back in that sense. All right, Coach, we could do this for another 2 hours. Where can coaches, or what do you suggest coaches get more help in this area? Because I think, again, we'll call it the third. Can we call it the third element? I think what
That
you
was
called it. Is that what's it called? Like what
we'll just call it
element?
mindset training.
Okay,
So
mindset
training
training.
the mind.
All
Yes.
right. So where can they get more resources and dive into this a little bit more? Um, what would you suggest?
Yeah, there's a lot of great research out there in some companies. So, so one of my favorites is a sports psychologist from the Seattle Seahawks. Michael Gervais has a podcast called Finding Mastery, which is one I go
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
quite a
I
bit.
listened to that one too. That's a good one.
Yeah, but for coaches, part of it is just mapping out perhaps what are the five biggest lessons I want to teach them, and then do a little bit of research. And I can share some samples as well that perhaps you could distribute. But
Okay. Yeah.
do I want to teach communication? Do I want to teach confidence? And do I want to teach overcoming anxiety? Those could be
Oh,
three
yeah.
big ones. Say, all right, maybe I'm not going to do 10, 15 of them, but can I do three things this year that are going to make a positive impact on others? And then there's some great research out there. So, I'm a peak performance coach at the Flow Research Collective, and we help people get more out of life and realize their potential. And I can share some resources that you can distribute as well.
That would be amazing, coach. Because again, I think this is today, tomorrow, this is a subject that coaches need to dive into as part of their culture. And I don't care if you're, like you said, fifth grade girls or high school girls, it doesn't matter, boys, it doesn't matter. Um, they're adolescents, and as adults, we're teachers and need to teach them life skills. And
Yeah,
like you said, after they stop playing basketball,
yeah.
right? Um, anyway, coach, this has been absolutely amazing. Can we have you back on again?
I'd love to. This was a great
This
conversation.
is amazing.
It's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. And I guess to sum it up, one quote that just popped in my head as we
Yeah.
talked about this is, I don't know, it was Henry Ford or who said it, but who cares? The quote matters. So as coaches, we need to remember that our athletes don't care what we know until they know that we care.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this is that emotional intelligence. So meeting them beyond the X's and O's and their benefit, and what can we do at least once a practice to let them know that we care about them as a human, as a student, as just a kid growing up. And then, yeah, we'll get into the X's and O's. And I think that simple fact will carry you a long way and create the stage to get rid of some of that anxiety and have kids not worry about the past, sort of worry about the future, but focus on here. And this is our time to make mistakes, to get better, and grow as a team.
Yeah. Amazing. We'll leave on that, coach. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that. And we look forward to having you on the Coaching Youth Hoops podcast once again. All right, coach, take care.
Thanks, Bill.
All right. Thank you.